I'd like to thank the organizers for the opportunity to present today. I am an assistant professor of medicine at Harvard, where I focus on the regulatory environment surrounding drug approval, and an associate professor of law at Bentley University. In my research, I'm most interested in drug effectiveness, ensuring that patients are adequately informed of drug effectiveness, and the policy levers that legislators can use to promote innovations that improve patient health. There is no universal definition of what repurposing is, but a broad definition could be the use of an existing drug for a new purpose. And it can occur at various points during a drug's life cycle. Depending on timing, the competitive and patent context can be different, and that has implications for policy. For example, drug repurposing can occur if a drug is in development but has not yet been approved for any indication. At that point, it may be difficult for anyone but the brand name manufacturer to repurpose. Early stage drugs are often known by code names, information about the drug may be proprietary, and the company may still have patents. For drugs at that stage, policymakers need to think about incentives for the brand name manufacturer to either develop the indication or, at a later date, to outlicense it so that someone else can develop it. If the drug failed long ago, the original patents will likely have expired, but other information like test data could still be held by a single company. For those drugs, trade secrets will probably be more important than patents. Or there could be narrower patents covering the use of the product rather than the drug substance. Once patents expire, a world of other players can now develop new uses for the drug. Academic researchers, competing drug firms, governments, or really anyone. If there are no generics and time has gone by after patent expiration, the original market is probably not very large or attractive. So unless the repurposed market is large, it may be especially difficult to get manufacturers interested in developing a new use at that stage. Governments or academics might still be interested. Amphotericin B liposomal is a possible example of this. It was approved in 1997 as an antifungal. It still has no generics, even though the last patent expired in 2016. A drug can also be repurposed after approval, but before patent expiration. One version of this scenario is if a second drug is approved later that's very costly, but not much different from an older drug that could be much cheaper. So in that case, you might want to repurpose the older drug to avoid the cost of the newer one. One example of this is bevacizumab, or Avastin, owned by Genentech and approved in 2004 for cancer. 2 years later, the same company, Genentech, got approval for ranibizumab, or Lucentis, for age-related macular degeneration, and the price difference for this new use was $50 for the older drug versus $2,000 for the newer one. In that case, some practitioners had the older drug compounded since the dose was different. A similar situation arises if the older drug is off patent and there are generics available. That was not the case for bevacizumab, but it was the case for Clozapine. Clozapine is an off-patent older drug. It was approved in 1989, and it had similar effects against Parkinson's psychosis as pimavanserin or Nuplazid, which was newer and much more expensive. So the Clozapine example illustrates the importance of defining what we mean by repurposing. Clozapine already had randomized controlled trial data showing efficacy, but the new use wasn't on the label. That allowed pimavanserin to earn an FDA breakthrough therapy designation, since off-label use doesn't count when you are determining the breakthrough status of a new drug. So does repurposing mean generating good data, or does it mean getting an already proven benefit on label? So all of that is to illustrate that the issue of repurposing is really not a single issue, but a collection of issues, which means that there may not be a single policy response. It depends on which IP and non-IP circumstances we care about most. So here are some of the intellectual property factors that may be relevant. Is the drug already approved, or is it still in development? Are any patents still valid? If they are, then it will be easier for the brand name manufacturer to take the lead on new uses. Are there relevant trade secrets, which may be especially important for never approved drugs or for biologics? Is the new use patentable, as opposed to the drug substance itself? If the new use has been disclosed in the literature by someone else before the patent is filed, the new use can never be patented because it is not new as far as the patent law is concerned. That's true even if the new use is not yet on the label. Are generics available? If they are, then it will probably be cheaper and easier for third parties to test the new use. And is a new dosage form, strength, route of administration, or combination needed? If any of those things are needed, then you may be able to patent that particular variation. Even if a change isn't technically needed, a manufacturer might still want to create a variation so that it can get stronger intellectual property protection. And with that point, it's important to remember that neither drug approval nor patentability require that the new drug be therapeutically superior to the older drug. Newness and some therapeutic effect is enough. In terms of non-IP factors, is good evidence enough, or is it important to get the new indication added to the labeling? How important is insurance coverage? Are we thinking about the United States or other countries which may have different disease burdens, neglected tropical diseases, for example, different reimbursement systems, different funding mechanisms, different patent contexts? Do we care whether the drug is available generically, or is it good enough if the brand name manufacturer adds the new indication to its label? What do we mean by new use? Is the Delta variant a new use of remdesivir? What about SARS-CoV-1? Does a new age group count, such as children? What about a different stage or severity of a disease? What about chickenpox versus shingles? The main issue is incentivizing research. There are several traditional options for funding. First, the government could fund the research directly, such as through the National Institutes of Health, either intramural within the NIH or extramural funding via grants to universities or others. The FDA also has an orphan grants program for rare diseases, or especially in the case where the new use might offer a much less expensive option that could reduce costs, government agencies like Medicare or Veterans Affairs could fund trials that might actually save them money. Or the government could provide indirect funding and let the market respond. The most common way this happens now is through patents or non-patent FDA exclusivities, which are a type of prize that allows higher prices, and those are eventually paid by the public a little bit more directly than they would be through taxes. One type of non-patent exclusivity in the infectious disease context is the Qualified Infectious Disease Product, or QIDP exclusivity. That has been available since 2012, and what it does is add an extra 5 years onto, for example, the 7-year orphan drug exclusivity or the 3-year new use exclusivity. Since 2007, Congress has given out transferable vouchers, or rather authorized the FDA to give out transferable priority review vouchers that have been worth recently around $100 million, and the drug companies can sell those to each other. They serve as incentives for the creation of drugs for neglected tropical diseases or drugs used in case of biological attack or other types of national emergencies. Currently, these are limited to new active ingredients, but Congress could potentially expand the program to cover new uses. More than 15 years ago, Bernie Sanders began introducing legislation that would create an $80 billion or so cash prize fund for new drugs. If that's ever enacted, Congress could make it cover new uses. Congress can also enact one-off legislation that commits the government in advance to buy a certain amount of a specified drug, if and when that drug is created. This is sometimes called an advance purchase commitment, and it's been used for the pneumococcal vaccines in 2009, although not funded by Congress. And more recently, it was part of the COVAX system to help pay for COVID-19 vaccines. If a drug is off patent and lots of generics are on the market, no single generic has the incentive to do research, since other manufacturers could then free ride on those investments. So in those cases, Congress could enact a tax incentive that would apply only to the manufacturer that actually undertakes the research, or to some other party such as an insurer that funds it. If good research has already been conducted and the issue is just about getting the new use on label, there are a number of ways to do that. Most commonly, the brand name manufacturer submits a supplemental new drug application. If the brand name manufacturer isn't interested, or if there is no brand name manufacturer anymore, then any party can submit either a full new drug application or a 505(b)(2) application named after the section of the statute in which it's found. The 505(b)(2) is technically a new drug application, but it allows reliance on data from a prior NDA or from the scientific literature as part of the basis for approval, which can reduce overall development costs. Last, any third party can initiate a label change, or at least try to, using what's called the citizen petition process. That's described in section 10.30 of the FDA's regulations. And if the FDA agrees with the proposal, it notifies the brand name manufacturer. The manufacturer isn't required to make the label change, but it is required to either propose a labeling change or explain why no change is warranted. There are some challenges with the citizen petition approach, including that the FDA usually requires primary data, which could be a problem if you want to rely on an academic publication that doesn't make primary data available for the new use. The FDA also usually conducts inspections of clinical research sites, which could be challenging if the new use relies on an already published academic paper. But if getting research findings on the label is challenging, another strategy is instead to focus on disseminating the research findings that already exist or updating clinical practice guidelines to be consistent with those findings. The goal being to encourage evidence-based off-label use. So in summary, repurposing is not a single thing. It occurs at different times and in different competitive and intellectual property contexts. Each scenario may require a different policy response. Repurposing can occur with or without a label change. And there are already an array of funding mechanisms to encourage both research and label expansions. One potential mechanism for label expansions that may deserve further consideration is the citizen petition process. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to discussing these issues further during the annual meeting.